Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Tom Harper had always dreamed of escaping the chaos of city life, trading crowded streets for the serenity of the countryside. When he bought a 40-acre haven in Oregon, he thought his worries were over. But a crumbling road and a power-hungry HOA president named Karen would soon turn his dream into a battle for justice. Tom Harper, a 42-year-old former IT professional, had grown weary of the unrelenting chaos of city life, the endless buzz of emails, the daily gridlock of urban traffic, and the cold impersonality of towering glass buildings had taken their toll. For years, he dreamed of a simpler, more fulfilling life, a life where he could trade his desk for a field and his keyboard for a spade. Finally, that dream began to take shape when he purchased a 40-acre property in the lush, forested hills of Oregon. The property was everything Tom had imagined. The modest two-story farmhouse stood proudly amid sprawling pastures. An aging barn added character to the land, and the dense woods beyond promised tranquility. Tom's new home was bordered by a mix of private properties and untouched nature, with a single winding dirt road connecting his land to the main highway. This road, though rough and uneven, was his, a fact he confirmed meticulously during the purchasing process. Among the neighboring landowners were Bill and Joe, two longtime residents who had been living in the area for over 15 years. Bill ran a small-scale cattle farm, while Joe operated a workshop crafting handmade furniture. Both men greeted Tom warmly when he first moved in, and their shared enthusiasm for rural living quickly turned acquaintances into friendships. The three often exchanged tips about livestock care, soil maintenance, and the quirks of the local community. However, not all neighbors were as welcoming. On one side of Tom's property loomed the perfectly manicured lawns and uniform houses of a newly developed community managed by a strict homeowners association, HOA. Tom had deliberately chosen his land because it was independent of the HOA's jurisdiction, and he had ensured that this was ironclad in his deed. The HOA's reputation for invasive rules and overzealous enforcement was well known, but Tom felt secure, knowing he wouldn't have to answer to them. Still, his new friends, Bill and Joe, warned him about Karen Brooks, the HOA's president, a woman infamous for her tendency to meddle in matters beyond her authority. For the first few months, Tom immersed himself in the joys of rural life. He repaired fences, planted a vegetable garden, and even brought in a small herd of goats to graze in the pastures. Every day felt like a step closer to the life he had always wanted. But one aspect of the property continued to bother him: the access road. While functional, it was rutted and overgrown in places, making every trip an ordeal. Tom knew that if he wanted to fully enjoy his new life, he needed to upgrade the road. The decision to repair the road wasn't made lightly. Tom spent weeks researching local contractors and the necessary permits. The road, which ran along the edge of his property and bordered the HOA's land, was entirely his. This was beyond question. Still, he understood that the road's proximity to the HOA's jurisdiction might attract unwanted attention, especially from someone as notorious as Karen. But Tom was prepared. Every document was in order, and every permit had been obtained. Nothing could go wrong, or so he thought. Tom's long-anticipated roadwork began on a crisp Monday morning. A crew of contractors arrived with heavy equipment, eager to transform the rugged, uneven path into a smooth, gravel road that would make access to his property easier and more reliable. Watching the machinery rumble to life, Tom felt a surge of satisfaction. Months of preparation, navigating permits, negotiating with contractors, and ensuring his plans adhered to local regulations were finally paying off. For the first 2 days, everything proceeded smoothly. The workers cleared debris, leveled the ground, and began laying the foundation for the new road. Tom, busy tending to his goats and overseeing repairs on the barn, stayed in close contact with the crew, ensuring they had everything they needed. Each evening, he took the long route home through his neighbor's land to avoid the construction zone. On the third morning, however, Tom's phone buzzed with an unexpected call from the lead contractor. "Tom, we've got a situation here," the man began hesitantly. "There's a woman, says her name is Karen Brooks, who showed up and told us to stop the work. She's claiming we're trespassing and says she'll call the authorities if we don't pack up." Tom's stomach sank as he quickly grabbed his keys and headed to the construction site. Upon arrival, he was greeted by the sight of Karen Brooks herself. a sharply dressed woman in her mid-30s standing confidently in the middle of the construction zone, arms crossed and flanked by two HOA board members. The contractors stood nearby, looking uneasy, their equipment idling as Karen launched into a tirade. "Ah, you must be the owner," Karen said coldly, fixing her gaze on Tom. "I'm Karen Brooks, president of the HOA that governs this area. I don't know what you think you're doing here, but this road runs along our property. You didn't consult us, and this unauthorized construction is a direct violation of HOA regulations." Tom, staying calm, explained, "This road is mine. It's fully within my property boundaries, and I have all the permits and permissions required for the work. Here, take a look for yourself." He handed her copies of his documents, which Karen skimmed with a tight-lipped expression. After a moment, Karen scoffed. "These might be valid for construction, but you didn't get HOA approval. Our bylaws require that any construction affecting the surrounding area be reviewed and authorized by us. Since you violated this process, you owe a $10,000 fine for non-compliance. Furthermore, I'm halting this construction until further notice." Tom felt a flare of anger but kept his tone measured. "I've already verified that the HOA has no jurisdiction over my land or this road. I'm within my rights to proceed, and no fines are due." Karen's expression hardened. "If you want to go down this road, no pun intended, fine. But I'll have my lawyer involved, and you'll regret not working with us." With that, she turned on her heel and left, leaving the contractors bewildered and Tom seething. Determined not to let Karen's threats derail his plans, Tom called his attorney, Mark Dawson, to confirm the legality of his actions. Mark assured him that everything was in order and that Karen's claims were baseless. At Mark's suggestion, Tom sent an official letter to the HOA outlining his rights, attaching copies of his permits, and demanding they cease interference. Tom hoped this would resolve the issue, but 2 days later, his phone buzzed again. The lead contractor's voice was more frantic this time. "Tom, we've got a bigger problem. Someone's blocked off the road with gates. Both ends. Our equipment's trapped, and the work we've done so far is destroyed. You need to come down here, now." When Tom arrived, he was greeted by a chaotic scene. 2 large metal gates had been installed overnight, completely enclosing the roadwork area. Karen was already there, flanked by 2 uniformed security guards. She wore a triumphant smirk as Tom approached. "Good morning, Mr. Harper," she said mockingly. "I see you got my message. I've obtained a court order to halt your little project. And since you're refusing to pay the fine, it's been adjusted to $50,000 to account for damages and legal fees. You're not getting your equipment back until this is resolved." Tom's blood boiled as he examined the supposed court order Karen presented, but something about it felt off. The paper looked hastily printed, and the signatures seemed suspiciously generic. He took a deep breath and called Mark again, explaining the situation. Mark advised Tom to contact the police immediately and hold his ground. As Karen gloated, Tom's anger gave way to determination. She may have thought she could intimidate him, but she had underestimated just how far he was willing to go to defend what was rightfully his. Tom arrived at the construction site for the second time that week, his patience worn thin. The scene was worse than he had imagined. The new gates, made of heavy metal and bolted into the ground, stood as an impenetrable barrier. Behind them, the road was a mess. Gravel scattered, equipment blocked in, and the once level surface torn apart. His workers, frustrated and bewildered, stood idle as Karen Brooks reveled in her manufactured chaos. "Ah, Mr. Harper," Karen said with a mocking smile as Tom approached. She stood near one of the gates, clutching a folder that she held like a weapon. "I see you've finally come to address this situation. I hope you've reconsidered and are ready to pay the penalties." Tom forced himself to stay calm, though every fiber of his being screamed to lash out. "Karen, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this has gone way too far. You're trespassing, you've destroyed my property, and you've blocked my equipment. What gives you the right?" Karen's smirk didn't waver. She pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Tom. "This, Mr. Harper, is a court order halting your illegal construction. You'll notice the fine has increased to $50,000. Until you pay, the gates stay, and your equipment remains exactly where it is." Tom scanned the document. Something about it seemed suspicious. The formatting was sloppy, the seal poorly imprinted, and the signature didn't match any official records he'd seen before. He looked up at Karen, his expression stern. "This is a joke. I'm calling the police." Karen's composure cracked slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Call whoever you want. It's a legal matter, and the court has spoken. But I wouldn't recommend escalating this. It'll only make things worse for you." Tom wasted no time dialing 911. As he waited for the police to arrive, Karen's smug demeanor faltered. She stepped aside, pacing near her car and clutching the folder tighter. Minutes later, the flashing lights of a patrol car appeared on the horizon. 2 officers stepped out, and Karen's expression shifted from smug confidence to thinly veiled anxiety. Tom approached the officers immediately, presenting his documentation and explaining the situation. "This road is entirely on my property," Tom said, handing over his permits. "She's blocked it with gates, destroyed my construction work, and is now showing me a document that I believe is fake." The lead officer, a man in his late 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, turned to Karen. "Ma'am, may I see this court order?" Karen hesitated, clutching the folder tighter. "There's no need for that. This is all just a misunderstanding, really. I was just trying to ensure the construction complied with local guidelines." "Ma'am, the document," the officer repeated firmly. Reluctantly, Karen pulled out the paper and handed it over. The officer examined it carefully, his frown deepening with each passing second. "This doesn't look legitimate. The seal is wrong, and the formatting is inconsistent with official court orders. Where did you get this?" Karen stammered. I mean, I had it prepared by a legal associate. It's valid, I assure you." The second officer moved closer. "Ma'am, you understand that providing false legal documents is a criminal offense, right? Do you have anything else to explain your actions here today?" Karen's face paled. "It's not what it looks like. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. This construction is disruptive, and I had to act quickly to ensure it didn't harm property values." As she spoke, Karen's hand crept toward the folder in her bag. In one swift motion, she yanked out a crumpled document, tore it in half, and shoved one piece into her mouth. The officers reacted instantly. "Stop! Hands where we can see them!" one officer barked. Karen turned and tried to bolt toward her car, but the officers quickly intercepted her. One restrained her while the other pried the half-chewed paper from her hand. Karen screamed incoherently, accusing everyone around her of harassment. But the officers remained professional. After a brief struggle, the officers secured Karen in handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for trespassing, destruction of property, and presenting falsified legal documents. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Tom watched as Karen was escorted to the patrol car, still yelling protests. One of the officers turned to him. "We'll document everything here, Mr. Harper. Do you have any additional evidence? Photos, witnesses?" Tom nodded, gesturing to his workers. "Plenty of witnesses, plus security camera footage from the property line. I'll provide everything." The officer nodded. "Good. I'd advise you not to remove the gates just yet. We'll need to complete the investigation, but your equipment can be retrieved once we've finished documenting the scene." Though Tom felt a sense of relief, he also felt the weight of the damage done. The road he'd spent months preparing to build was in ruins, and he'd have to start over. As he watched the police car drive away with Karen in the back seat, he knew one thing for certain: this fight wasn't over yet. With Karen in custody, Tom returned home feeling a mix of relief and frustration. While her immediate interference had been halted, the damage she caused to his project was undeniable. His road was ruined, his equipment had been trapped for days, and the costs were mounting. Tom knew this wasn't just a battle over a road anymore. It was about standing up to someone who thought they could bend the law to their will. The next morning, Tom met with his attorney, Mark Dawson, to assess the situation. Mark, a sharp and experienced lawyer, was already compiling a list of charges against Karen. "We've got her on multiple counts," Mark said confidently. "Falsifying legal documents, trespassing, destruction of property, and interfering with lawful construction. Plus, with the security footage and witnesses, we've got a solid case." Mark advised Tom to focus on gathering additional evidence. Over the next week, Tom worked tirelessly to ensure every detail of Karen's actions was documented. He retrieved video recordings from his property's security cameras, which showed Karen installing the gates and supervising the destruction of the road. He also obtained statements from his workers, who detailed her aggressive behavior and the phony court order she had brandished. Tom's neighbors, Bill and Joe, proved to be invaluable allies. Over coffee one evening, they shared stories of how Karen had terrorized the previous landowner, an elderly widow who eventually sold the property to escape Karen's harassment. Bill even remembered Karen threatening to make her life miserable if she didn't comply with HOA demands. As Mark dug deeper, Karen's pattern of behavior began to emerge. Public records revealed that she had been involved in similar disputes in other neighborhoods. In some cases, residents had capitulated to her demands out of fear or frustration. "This isn't just about you, Tom," Mark said one afternoon. "She's a serial manipulator. Taking her to court could set a precedent and protect others." Meanwhile, the local news picked up on the story. The image of Karen being handcuffed by police had been caught on camera by a passerby, and it quickly spread online. The media coverage brought more victims forward, residents from nearby neighborhoods who shared their own experiences of Karen's bullying tactics. One elderly man recounted how Karen had fined him repeatedly for imagined violations, while a young couple described how she had used similar fake documents to block their home renovations. As the court date approached, the case against Karen solidified. Mark filed a civil suit seeking compensation for the damage Karen had caused, along with punitive damages for her blatant disregard for the law. With mounting evidence and a growing network of allies, Tom felt more prepared than ever to face Karen in court. Still, the road to justice wouldn't be easy. While Karen remained in custody, her attorneys were already working to downplay her actions as misguided attempts to protect the neighborhood. Tom knew this was just another of her manipulative tactics, but he was determined to see this through to the end. The courtroom buzzed with quiet energy as Tom entered, accompanied by his attorney, Mark Dawson. This day had been months in the making. The evidence against Karen Brooks was overwhelming, but Tom knew that courtroom battles often turned on presentation, not just facts. Karen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by her attorneys. Her usually sharp demeanor was dulled, her face pale and drawn. Though her lawyers tried to present her as a concerned citizen who had made mistakes, Tom and Mark were ready to dismantle this facade. The trial began with opening arguments, during which Mark outlined Karen's deliberate and malicious actions. He detailed her history of using fake legal documents to intimidate, the damage she inflicted on Tom's road, and the pattern of bullying behavior unearthed during the investigation. Karen's defense team countered by portraying her as a well-meaning HOA president who simply overstepped her authority. Tom took the stand first. He recounted his painstaking preparation for the road project, the harassment he endured from Karen, and the financial and emotional toll of her interference. Mark presented the security footage, clearly showing Karen overseeing the destruction of the road and installing the gates. The courtroom grew silent as video evidence also captured her boasting about her fabricated court order. Next, Mark called several witnesses: Tom's contractors who testified about Karen's threats, Bill and Joe, who shared their experiences of her harassment, and other local residents who described similar encounters with her manipulations. The jury listened intently as a pattern of calculated intimidation emerged. Karen's attorneys scrambled to shift blame, claiming she had acted under misguided assumptions about the road's ownership. But Mark's cross-examination exposed the lies. When pressed about the forged court order, Karen broke down on the stand, admitting, "I just wanted to teach him a lesson." Her emotional outburst sealed her fate. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty. Karen was convicted of falsifying legal documents, trespassing, destruction of property, and malicious harassment. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and ordered to pay Tom $2 million in damages, an amount that would cover his losses and punitive damages for her egregious actions. As the judge delivered the final ruling, Tom felt a wave of relief. Justice had been served, and Karen's reign of terror was over. The courtroom victory marked the end of Karen Brooks' reign of intimidation, but for Tom, it was also the beginning of something new. With the trial behind him and the $2 million in compensation awarded, he could finally move forward. The funds not only covered his losses from the destroyed road, but also gave him the means to rebuild stronger and better than before. The first step was restoring the road. Tom hired a new crew of contractors, this time sparing no expense. Over the course of 2 months, the road was transformed into a smooth, durable gravel pathway. Its sturdy design ensured easy access to his home and symbolized his perseverance through the chaos Karen had caused. With the road complete, Tom's life began to settle into a peaceful rhythm. His neighbors, Bill and Joe, rallied around him, offering to help whenever he needed it. True to their promise, they organized a celebratory barbecue at Tom's newly completed road. Dozens of local residents showed up to congratulate him and share stories of their own struggles with Karen, finding solace in knowing her manipulative tactics had finally been exposed. At the barbecue, Bill raised a toast. "Here's to Tom, someone who didn't just stand up for himself, but for all of us. You proved that bullies like Karen don't get to win." The crowd cheered, and Tom felt a deep sense of community he had never known before. Meanwhile, news of Karen's downfall continued to spread. Her 10-year prison sentence served as a cautionary tale for other power-hungry HOA leaders. Local newspapers dubbed the case a landmark victory for property owners' rights, and it became a precedent cited in legal circles. Tom, however, was ready to leave the drama behind. With his road completed, his farm thriving, and his friendships with Bill and Joe stronger than ever, he focused on the life he had dreamed of when he first moved to the countryside. His goats grazed peacefully in the pasture, his vegetable garden flourished, and the tranquility of his land was finally restored. Months later, Tom received an unexpected package, a handmade wooden sign from Joe. It read, "Harper Road, built to last." Tom smiled as he hung the sign at the entrance to his property, proud of the battle he had fought and the life he had built. The conflict with Karen had tested his patience, his resolve, and his belief in justice. But in the end, it had all been worth it. Tom learned that standing up for his rights wasn't just about protecting his property. It was about setting an example, proving that integrity and determination could prevail over manipulation and deceit. As the sun set over his land that evening, Tom sat on his porch, a cup of coffee in hand, and watched the light fade over the peaceful road that led to his home. For the first time in months, the future felt wide open, and Tom was ready to embrace it.